All right. Thank you for tuning in once again. And we're back with a very special guest, Chris Andersen, and former director at St. Bonaventure University with Student Wellness Center, and previously, and also just started his own practice. And thank you for sitting down with us today. How you doing today?
Good, good, David. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And very important topic today, and we're talking about mental health, and that number has kind of skyrocketed the last year and a half. So,
Mhm.
I just thought that it would be helpful for somebody listening uh to listen to an expert talk about some stuff. And
Mhm. Well, first of all, David, let me just go ahead and just draw a distinction between two terms that people erroneously use interchangeably, and that is the term mental health and mental illness. Mental health refers to all of our mind's health, the way we think, the way we experience life, and we all have mental health. Every single person that has a mind has mental health, but not everybody is mentally healthy. Just like everybody has a body doesn't mean we're all physically healthy. Okay. So just like we can have physical illnesses, we can have mental illnesses. All right. And a mental illness is a diagnosable condition of our emotions and or our thinking patterns, which then can have consequences on our physical life and our relationships and also other areas of our life, such as our career, our future, that type of thing.
mm, okay, cool. And what made you want to go into this field?
um, for quite a number of years, I was involved in an overseas mission. I'm in the United States, and this mission was actually down on the island of Jamaica. And then
Mm,
I lived there for a few years, so I was able to just really using my skills and abilities as a counselor. Even though before I was actually a counselor, I felt like I had a good connection with people and being able to assist people in various areas of their life. So when I returned back to the United States, with the potential for going back to Jamaica in the future, which may or may not happen just because life takes different turns. Um, I live near St. Bonaventure University, which is where I ended up working for a few years here, prior to going into private practice. And I decided to go get a counseling degree at St. Bonaventure, which would then allow me to either continue to do work uh, in the field of missions and or just stay home locally here and work with folks here locally. And so that's really the reason why I did it. It was a very versatile degree, and it has been given me a number of opportunities to work with folks and really, I think, make a difference in a number of venues.
okay, nice. And also, I forgot to say that Chris speaks Patois, so he might throw that in there at
Also,
the
gotta look at Patois.
end. Well, there you have it right there.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of Jamaicans, I'll be just walking around town
Yeah.
or in a city somewhere, and I'll hear the Jamaican accent, and I'll just throw a little patois in their direction, and the look on their
Uh,
faces, they're like, "Did that just come out of you?" So yeah, yeah,
oh
definitely.
man.
I love my second home in Jamaica. I love my family down there, and yeah,
Yeah.
think about it every day.
And I know you're a man of faith, and how
Mhm.
did you use your faith to get where you are today?
Well, it's ultimately gotten me everywhere that I've been in my life, and I became a Christian back when I was a junior in high school. Then I went to college and had to really, like every college student, you have to decide what you're going to do with that faith. Are you going to continue to pursue it, or are you going to allow the world and allow our secular society to influence your life and your decisions? And I
Yeah.
decided I wanted to I wanted to keep my life based in Christ and keep my life based on the truth. And it doesn't mean that it's been a 100% smooth ride ever since I made that decision, but definitely the best one I could have made, because it does impact all of our lives, and it ultimately is based on truth. in a world where we're constantly bombarded with different philosophies and mindsets, people nowadays think that just because they feel something that it must be true, and that is absolutely not the right way to live your life. We cannot live our lives based on feelings. And a good example I'll give you is that if you go to a movie and let's say a horror movie, and you're feeling, well, you're sitting there watching the movie, and also, and then you're terrified,
Yeah.
and just, but what the feeling of terror that you're seeing, it's an emotion. What you're seeing is based on what you're seeing on the screen,
Yeah.
but there's no reality to that. But yet, in our society today, we're basing a lot of the decisions we make and a lot of subjective truth based on our emotions, and that is a very, very, at best, it's a very dangerous way to live your life, because then you will easily lose your grounding in what true reality is. So definitely the faith component has given me a grounding that I would not have otherwise had without it.
Okay. Were you going through something personal at that time as a junior that made you decide to go to Christianity, or no?
No, not really. I was just going to a good church that had a very good pastor who was very good about just explaining truth. And I quickly learned that no amount of church going, no amount of Sunday schooling, no amount of church choir singing or whatever was actually going to be what it took to get me into heaven. And the only thing that would get me into heaven is a solid faith in Christ, knowing that only he could do for me, which I could not do for myself, which was live a good enough life, or in his case, obviously, he lived a perfect life in order to get me, back in relationship with God, and then which will ultimately one day result in me being able to go to heaven. So it just made sense. Good pastor. And then, I, even at that time as a junior in high school, I had to decide, well, all this churching that I've been doing all these years, living with my parents, what am I going to do with it? So I even made that decision back then that I was going to take it seriously. And then that, I think, helped pave the way to me taking it seriously later in life when I went to college.
I want to talk about mental health and relationships. And for example, let's say, a partner is like spazzing out at their spouse for no reason. And their partner might respond back negatively, but at the end of the day, that person might be going through something, but they just might be taking their stress out on the person that's closest to them. But so like, what are the signs to know that my partner is going through some mental issues, and I need to get them help? Because sometimes people don't want to talk about their issues; they just want to keep it to themselves.
Well, speaking in general terms, I mean, and this can apply to anybody, really, any relationship where doesn't necessarily, it's not specific to athletes or anything, but really, if you see your spouse withdrawing, or otherwise like changes of behavior that aren't typical of your spouse, or I mean, it can be very outward. It can be more shouting, verbal, emotional, and or physical abuse. Clearly are signs that things have changed. But definitely, if you start to see changes in behavior, or like I said, withdrawing, maybe a coldness, definitely something to discuss. The first thing is always discuss the problem. And if your partner, your spouse is not responding well to the invitations to discuss and keep the lines of communication open, you just want to make sure that it doesn't escalate into abuse, whereas you might become at risk of being abused in harmful way. Well, all abuse is harmful, but in danger of your safety. Your safety is in danger. So definitely you just got to look for some early warning signs. And if there's anything that comes up that is very concerning, then consult with, obviously, if you're belong to a solid church, consult with a pastor or even a counselor yourself, just to find out what you can do. And there's also a variety of topics on, I should say, resources online on various websites, and that you can do a little research yourself to find out what would actually be the best way to go about handling the situation.
Okay. You guys heard that? You gotta ask your spouse questions sometimes, And
communication is really important. It's not easy. it's not easy to discuss these topics, and you might meet up with a lot of resistance, especially if the relationship has not been very solid for a period of time. It might be very difficult, but making the attempt to open the channels of communication is very important, as that allows things to get discussed as a preventative measure to help prevent things from escalating to the point where you might need to involve a counselor or marriage counselor or somebody to help straighten things out.
Yeah. And sometimes it can even affect the kids too when they're around and they see back and forth with the parents. So it's always good to look for professional help if they can, as well as how can athletes deal with mental issues. If for example, like NBA guys, they're big stars. A lot of people depend on them, so they don't want to show their weakness to everybody. And they might feel the pressure of not going to seek help. So how can they deal with their issues?
Well, athletes, particularly once they reach the college level and beyond, do have a lot of extra sources of stress on them. They not only have to balance life's priorities just like the rest of us do, but now they have the added pressure of fame and fortune, which, we all kind of look at that as being, wow, it'd be nice to have that much money and this and that. But I'll tell you what, there is a definite price to pay. And it's not just a price of skill and time commitment, but routinely professional athletes have really messed up family lives because of the pressure, because of the lack of time and stability at home, and being able to really provide that stability for their spouses, but also any children that might be involved. And I think too, that when we see professional athletes that do balance those things out well, they tend to be athletes of faith. They really do. And they tend to have the priorities right. They tend not to look for the glory for themselves. They tend to turn that messaging back on God where it should be. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of resistance to that trend today. We're seeing some professional athletes that are very vocal about their faith coming under a lot of pressure for it. And sadly, that's really just, I think, I'm not, well, if we're going to talk about it strictly from a scriptural standpoint, there's a spiritual battle going on between the secular and the world that is not believing, and in a believing world where, these professional athletes that are believing, they're going to be attacked at the spiritual level. And that translates out into additional pressure from society, where society tries to look for holes in their witness so they can say, aha, see, you're not who you said you are. You made a mistake. Well, of course, we all make mistakes, including Christian professional athletes. None of us are perfect. I mean, I'm not an professional athlete, obviously, but, so that those sources of pressure are there for them in very intense ways. And, but when they do have their priorities straight, I look at the various professional athletes, that maintain their faith, that maintain their priorities, and they tend to do quite well. I'm not saying that they're, the best necessarily in terms of skill or how far they go in their sport. But I would say that if you look at the other areas in their life, including their stability of their families, the health of their relationships, these various initiatives and foundations that they start, they all tend to do quite well. And I think that's because of being directly blessed by God, because they're keeping God first. It's kind of, these multimillionaire athletes tend to start foundations for various causes, which is good. However, and this is just kind of my opinion, to me, I feel like I can kind of spot more. I mean, there's genuineness in certain foundations, other than I just have to do it now because I'm a rich athlete. I'm just going to start this because everybody's doing it, versus, somebody who's truly committed to their faith, and their foundations for doing good really tend to thrive. They really do. And again, I think those are efforts that are being blessed by God, as well as I think the fans tend to contribute more when they sense a genuineness in an athlete, as opposed to somebody who's doing something just because they're kind of supposed to. I think the fan bases of these professional athletes really dictate a lot more, folks that are looking for a genuine athlete, not just somebody who's good on the field or the court, but somebody who is good in other areas of their life. And interestingly enough, I believe it was Charles Barkley got himself into some trouble back in I believe it was the 1980s, when he said, look, we're not supposed to be role models for your children. Your parents are supposed to be your role models. We're just out playing a game. So stop pointing your children in our direction. We mess up. And I mean, quite honestly, and he was also referring to the fact that a lot of professional athletes should not be role models. Let's face it, they got some behavior patterns and issues that I think any parent that really looks at it would be like, no, I don't want my kid living that way. So, and he got a lot of slack for that, because he was saying this whole new role modeling concept that they tried to say professional athletes are role models for children. He was like, no, we're not. Your parents need to be that. And if your parents aren't that, then you got an issue. Your parents need to be living the life. Your parents have to be setting the example that your kids are going to follow, and directly instructing their children in the values and morals and in ways of living life that are ultimately going to put them on firm ground. And so, professional athletes do have a lot of pressure, and, obviously they've got a very glorious lifestyle that people are envious of, but at the same time, we don't always see what's going on behind the cameras. And a lot of times I don't think we'd want to live that life.
And I know that the rate on anxiety and fear has also increased. And I even know some people that haven't left their house in the whole pandemic, and that's not psychologically good for anybody. So talk about the anxiety part.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've all experienced a higher level of anxiety over this pandemic. Here's this mystery illness that started floating through the air back in, well, I believe it was earlier in 2019 than what we were led to believe, but it really became to it really started to hit us in the face in January, February of 2020. And then, of course, by early March, I think we were all shut down by early March of 2020. And of course, none of us that are alive today have ever had to go through anything like that. So I think the experts were scrambling to try to understand what was going on and to make sense of it. And then, of course, governments and at all different levels are trying to quickly develop plans to help stem the spread of this mystery illness and figure out, how do we catch it? We catch it. Is it airborne? Is it surface transmitted through touching surfaces? And sadly, our mainstream media did us absolutely no service in this. It very quickly became a politicized. Do you get the feeling that we're really on the brink of something big? And she just looked at me. She's like, I am scared. I don't for my family. I don't know what's going on. What's tomorrow going to look like? But the stabilizing force in all of this, again, is faith.
Yeah. So talk about social anxiety and depression.
Okay. Yeah. So the pandemic caused a spike in mental health concerns, particularly social anxiety and depression. Now, if you think about it, social anxiety oftentimes is when people have a false understanding of how they're being viewed by others. And so that makes them less likely to want to engage people in various social settings. And so when all of a sudden you've got conditions where we have to stay home and not engage people socially, for some people that was fine. People are like, great, I don't like to go out anyway. I have no problems with that. For others like myself, who I tend to be very sociable and I love to get together with my friends, that was hard. It was really hard to deal with. And so that, of course, in turn could increase the rates, and it did, the rates of depression, because people are becoming more isolated, particularly those who are not very tech savvy and couldn't stay connected via Zoom calls, FaceTime, or whatever medium people are using to stay connected. So we did see a skyrocket of mental health concerns, particularly social anxiety and depression, because of just the challenges that we were facing with the pandemic. But now, like I said, now that things are starting to open up a little bit more, we're getting the pandemic under control. People increasingly have an opportunity to re-engage their loved ones, their friends, their family members, return to work. And I would encourage people to do that. And not and try to as much as possible interact with people face to face, as opposed to doing so online. Online interactions just really are not. They're a very limited substitute for healthy personal interactions.
Absolutely. And also I wanted to talk about your business and how's that going?
Good. It takes some time to get a counseling practice opened up, but the pieces are falling into place for me, and so I definitely appreciate you asking about that. And I plan on specializing in general mental health counseling, but also with and specialize in addiction counseling as well. So addictions are a far-reaching problem that a lot of times people aren't aware of.
Okay. And where can people find you online if you want to give your info?
Well, and again, I don't know where all of your listeners are located.
They're all over the world.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, I'm primarily limited. I'm licensed in the state of New York, so I am pretty limited. As folks pretty much anywhere in New York can either call my office or get a hold of me. I'm still in the process of getting my website set up and getting everything in place for that. But
Yeah.
it's Andersen Mental Health Counseling, and that's just my last name, and mental health counseling is the subtitle. And the phone number is 716-307-3055. And that's the phone number people can reach to get a hold of me to set up an appointment. So yeah, it's been quite a ride, and I do miss elements of the college environment. As you said earlier, I was the director of the Center for Student Wellness at St. Bonaventure University, where your brother works. That's he's a good guy. We get together for every now and then for even after me leaving the university. I still keep in touch with your brother, and
yeah.
So I worked on campus as a counselor, but also the administrator over health services and the counseling center on campus. So, but yeah, so transitions, we just had a baby. My wife and I had another baby, and, throw all that into the mix with a pandemic, and it makes for a pretty stressful past couple of years.
All right, cool. And yeah, I mean, I'll write in the description so everybody can take a look at it again. And yeah, thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you for chopping it up with me, and
Oh yeah.
hopefully the listeners learn something and actually apply it to their life, or it's going to be useless, as well as seek professional help when you can. Talk to somebody, friend, family, and somebody that you trust.
Yeah.
Just don't keep everything to yourself sometimes. And
don't bottle it up. You bottle it up, and eventually it causes problems. So
yes,
it's definitely good to, and if reach out to folks wherever you're located in the world. There's counselors, pastors. If you're having a hard time making connections with others on your own, definitely don't hesitate to let those that for a living work in the field, so, counseling and your churches or whatever, they can be great ways of connecting you into folks to help bolster that all important support system.
Okay, and that's as well as that's why I'm doing the one-on-one coaching too. So if you guys get a chance, you can book a session and we can talk some things. And I'm gonna leave it right there. Peace out.
Sounds good. Thanks, David.